Hey guys, this is Mark Goldberg from Mark Vlogs Watches with another exciting episode for you today. I am going to tell you why you should not worry about Rolex. You don't need to cry for me, Argentina, and you definitely don't need to cry for Rolex. But before we move into the meat and potatoes of this video, let's go ahead and do the quick fist watch check. And here it is. Today, I'm not even wearing a Rolex. I am wearing a beautiful Doxa Sub 300T. Look at the color of that dial. And it's got a very cool micro-adjustable clasp on a beads of rice bracelet. Guys, I got a letter, and so I got some comments here from a reader into my last video in which I talked about Rolex and whether you should buy one today. I'll tell you what, I'll go ahead and put a link to that video that this fellow is writing in about. I'll put a link to that video in this one here. Before I move on, I want to ask you, please, now more than ever, I need you. Go ahead and hit the like on this button because this video will not see the light of day unless you help me by doing that. And also subscribe to my channel, please, because I've got lots to talk to you about in this time of crisis during 2020. Lots of content. Don't miss it. Stick with me. Okay, so Sally Hats, this is for you. But first, I'm going to go ahead and read Sally Hats' entire monologue here, and then I'll tell you why I don't agree with very much of what he said. But a lot of you may, and Mr. Sally Hats is laboring under a lot of misunderstandings and misapprehensions, and let's clarify. But first, here's what he says. Rolex makes roughly 800 to 900,000 watches, supposedly, and what he means is per year. They don't stop making watches to cut supply, which is what I said in the prior video. Look at the link in the description. They don't stop making watches to cut supply, and if they did cut supply, they wouldn't stop production, which means the factory would be full of watches for times like today. Can't have it both ways. Rolex is not worth hundreds of billions of dollars. They need to pay hundreds of watchmakers. Security, law firms, CPAs, taxes, marketing, executives. Do you think that because the factory workers are not working, they're not getting paid? This economic situation, along with the production stop, is devastating to Rolex. They have lost millions of dollars in revenue. Last thing they would do is to cut supply. That would be just really bad for business. Oh, Sally Hats. First, let me tell you something. I know this is going to come along as mocking perhaps your message, but I want to assure you that I am very grateful that you took the time to write me so much, that you put the thought into it. I do believe that you were mislaboring under a lot of misinformation here, and I'm going to clarify and school and educate you right now, but I want to thank you for writing to me. Brother, respectos, thank you for being with me. So, the first statement that Sally Hats makes, I do agree with, and that is it is the conventional wisdom that Rolex makes roughly close to 800,000 to 1 million units per year. So that is about the only thing that we agree on. Now, picking our way through the rest of this, he says they don't stop making watches to cut supply. Well, what I have said in a few other videos is that Rolex very carefully controls the supply of watches. What they do is they create demand with an extreme amount of marketing, and then they offer watches into the market just below what they really could sell. I don't know how much below, but like a lot below, like maybe 20% below, maybe more, especially of the hot steel watches. And then when the timing is right, they release more into the production line. So I think that Rolex is constantly timing the flow of what they want to supply into the marketplace. I do not think they're warehousing millions of Submariners, hedging against the day they may need them. I think they make them as they need them, more or less, but they're certainly controlling the supply into the pipeline. If that weren't true, you'd walk into any authorized dealer at any period of time and buy literally anything you want, and you can't do that. You used to be able to do that. When I was a young man, children, come sit on my lap and let Uncle Marky tell you about when I was a youngster. 30 years ago when I was a young man, you could walk into an authorized dealer and buy anything you wanted. They had everything. And in fact, to be frank, the steel sports watches, nobody wanted those. We all wanted the Datejusts because that meant, you had made it as a business guy. The steel sports, they were cheap and unloved, and you could buy as many of them as you wanted. Okay, so Rolex definitely does control supply and production. So you're wrong there. They definitely do. And he says if they did cut supply, they wouldn't stop production, meaning that the factory would be full of watches for times like today. No, I don't think so. They have a production schedule, so when they cut, when they send people home, and the French watchmakers and workers, a lot of whom go to Switzerland on a regular basis to work at Rolex like daily, those guys can't get back and forth across the border anymore. But still, there was a lot of stuff in the pipeline, meaning had come out of the factory, was completed, had come out of the factory. So do they have inventory at the factory? Well, I'm sure they do, but I don't think they have years worth of production on hand at any given time. I think they do definitely control supply, and I think they're constantly tweaking and adjusting how fast they want these things to come off the robotic assembly line, that is Rolex. And then he says Rolex is not worth hundreds of billions of dollars. How do you know that? Now look, I don't know. I'm going to argue that they are. Okay, let's just put it out there. I'm going to argue that they're worth hundreds of billions of dollars. That being said, I can't prove it any more than you can, but let me tell you why I am pretty sure that you're wrong about that. And that would be because Rolex is not a private company, meaning they're not like family held. They're not a public company like the Richemont Group. Richemont owns like Omega and a whole bunch of other things. And so you can not only invest in that company, but they have to release their earnings, their P&Ls, their profit and loss statements and so forth. So the larger economic picture for many of the brands is a completely open book. Other companies such as Patek Philippe are owned by an individual family, and they are not required to release sales figures or P&L because it's a private family business. But Rolex is neither of those two things. It's not a family-held company. I mean, it was when Hans Wilsdorf started it, but then he died, and it did not go public the way the Richemont Group did. What it did was Hans Wilsdorf left it in the hands of a private foundation, which has a board of directors. So actually what Rolex is it is a charitable trust, and under Swiss law, presumably, they have like no reporting. Like I imagine that they have some obligation to report some things to the to the Swiss government and to meet whatever stringent requirements those guys might have. But let me tell you what, if you're a charitable foundation in the United States, your financials are, a certain amount of those financials are public record, because you have to prove on a regular basis to the Internal Revenue Service that you are in fact a non-profit. But the Swiss, they invented secrecy. Have you never heard of the secret Swiss bank account? The entire Swiss economy runs on secrecy, on nefarious, underhanded dealings. And Rolex is a charitable trust who is beholden to no one other than its own board of directors. So do not cry for Rolex. Trust me. Are they worth hundreds of billions of dollars? Oh, you bet you. They need to pay hundreds of watchmakers, security, law firms, CPA, tax, marketing executive. Of course they do. That's absolutely true. That's a cost of doing business. Do you think that because the factory workers are not working there, not getting paid? You have a good point there. None of us know this for sure at the time. Although, guys, let me just quick aside. I've had some very good reporting coming out of people in the know from Rolex Geneva. So if you know something about whether Rolex is paying their staff right now, even while they are on furlough, you know how to get a hold of me. markgoldberg8@gmail.com. Sally hats, I think you're right about that one. Rolex has a lot of very highly skilled workers. And so I do think that they're paying them. That would be my best guess. And also, too, remember, you're talking about Switzerland, France. Countries like this have highly socialized laws in terms of labor. Here in the United States, man, it's employment at will. 3.2 million people lost their jobs in the last week. Scary and crazy. So the government here is proposing to help people out on various levels and in various ways. But in countries like France, it's so socialized. There's very strict regulations about when, why, and how you're allowed to fire people, stop paying people, etc. So trust me, I believe you. Those people are getting paid. And but the economic situation, along with the production stop, being devastating to Rolex, no. Listen, remember something. Rolex, they're down to the point where they make everything. Okay, they smelt their own gold. They select their own diamonds. They cut their own precious gems. They have done everything but buy De Beers, the diamond mines. They don't own their own gold mine. They don't own their own diamond mine, but they but they smelt their own gold, meaning that rose gold, yeah, they mix it and make it themselves. It's incredible what they do. They have jewel buyers, and they're selecting diamonds and rubies and emeralds and all that stuff, and then they're cutting them themselves. So they own the means of production. Okay, do not worry about them, my friend. They are going to be just fine. The last thing they do would be to cut supply. That would be really bad for business. Here's how I'm going to wrap up. No, it wouldn't. It would be good for business, and here's why. Rolex is a luxury brand much more than it is a tool watch. Now, I'm not going to say it doesn't have tool watch properties, especially the steel sports. They do. They're extremely robust. The watch industry, especially Rolex, has turned far from tool watches. It is no longer the watch of professional divers. They've got technology and dive computers for that stuff. It's become a luxury brand. And Sally hats, the most important thing when you're talking about a luxury brand is exclusivity, cachet, high price, demand. Your reputation is everything. So if they keep cranking out watches with all these unemployed people and all these closed authorized dealers, and those watches just keep stacking up, well, the prices are going to fall. They're going to become easily available. Do you think that Rolex couldn't make more Submariners if they want to? Do you think that the waiting list is not like a completely deliberate strategy from Rolex? I do. I remember when you could walk into a Rolex dealer and just buy any steel sports watch that you wanted. And those days are gone, not because Rolex can't keep up with demand, but because they deliberately created extreme demand. Remember, they spend $1 billion every 10 years creating this demand, and then they don't meet it. And that's on purpose. Why? They want you to want it. They want you to wait in line. They're like that nightclub that wants that line out the door of people waiting to get in, and then they pick and choose, which famous, celebrity can get in, so the paparazzi will take their photographs. That's what Rolex has done. They are a luxury brand. So let me tell you something, guys. Don't cry for me, Argentina, and don't cry for Rolex. They are like cockroaches. They're going to inherit the earth. Well, guys, do you agree with me, or do you agree with Sally hats? Should we cry for Rolex? Is Rolex, on the ropes? Have they lost hundreds of millions of dollars worth of value? Or are they just opening the secret contingency plan called Armageddon, end of the world, and it tells the board of directors exactly what to do to preserve value and to survive? Because that's what I think. What do you think? Guys, thanks for being with me. Remember, subscribe. 2020 is going to be a wild ride. Let's do this together. Subscribe to my channel. Goldberg, peace out.
Paint the sky.